I'm in the very, very early stages of putting together a little bit of a Batman fan film, and I want it to feel as connected to the Reeves-verse as possible. And I thought, what better way of doing that than to include a very minor yet recognizable character from the intro of the Batman. And that is the Drophead, which is this guy kind of standing menacingly behind me right here. Now, I think he only has about 60 seconds of screen time in the whole 3-hour film, literally only right there in the intro, but still a really recognizable design. And I feel like anyone who's seen the Batman or is a fan of the Batman, you could show them this mask and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's the Drophead. And I haven't really seen anyone do like a cosplay variation on this, for whether it's for a short film or cosplay or just you would like to have the costume yourself. Now, before I get really deep into it, it's worth mentioning that the only kind of visual reference we have for what this costume looks like is what we see on screen. For context, the Batsuit and the Drifter, for example, there's tons of behind the scenes featurettes and set photos and all those kind of things where we as a kind of fan community can get really close up detailed looks of stuff and try and nail the screen accurate parts as closely as possible. For this guy here, again, seen on screen for like 60 seconds, all we have to go off is what they show us on camera. Now, most of these costume parts, so like the red puffer jacket and the under hoodie and the pants and the gloves and all that, really simple, really easy to pick up, and you don't even have to really worry about being that screen accurate as long as you've hit mainly the puffer jacket and the hoodie. The most difficult part of this whole getup is definitely the Drophead mask. Now, I'm pretty sure, based on looking at this in the film, I'm pretty sure it's like one of those flexible pullover Halloween masks that you'd pick up from like a Spirit Halloween or a costume shop or whatever. But getting one of those made custom is a little bit difficult because it involves like latex, rubber and all that stuff. I don't really know. That's kind of outside the scope of what I know how to do. But 3D printing is a lot more accessible and it's going to basically achieve the same effect. What I ended up doing with this one here. So I don't think, again, it's not 100% accurate to the film, but it's pretty close. I also scaled this one a little bit too big. So in the film, it's a lot smaller on the dude's head, but I figured it's better to have it larger than too small and then not fit me. So this also doesn't have like the blacked out eyes and mouth yet, but I will show you guys how you can do that and still see through it, obviously, because there's nothing less threatening than kind of stumbling around in the dark, not really knowing where you're going. So the file for this was actually provided by Apocalypse Creations over on cults3d.com. Now, it cost me about 10 bucks for the file, and then I sent it off to CraftCloud to be 3D printed. As I've touched on previously, I don't know how to 3D print, and I'm not really set up to learn in my current little apartment. But if you don't know how, that's totally fine. I send all my files off to CraftCloud, which acts like a middleman, kind of like a broker. You can upload your files, they'll give you a quote, you can choose your materials, and then they'll send your file off to be printed with whatever options you choose. I ummed and ahed a little bit about what material to get this printed in. Typically, most 3D prints or most 3D printed cosplay props are going to be done in PLA, which is kind of your standard. It's very cheap, it's very easy to print material, but I ended up going for something called PETG. Now, PETG is it's a little bit more of a sturdy material. However, it is a little bit harder to print. Now, because I wasn't printing it myself and I was sending it off to like actual professional 3D printing companies, I was less worried about that. I did kind of I sent them a message saying, hey, if this can all be printed in one piece, I understand that there's going to be like imperfections in the final mask. That's fine. That's where all this finishing and sanding work comes in. Now, before we get started, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button and the like button, helps me out a ton. And yeah, let's get into it. Now, I was actually super fortunate to be away at my parents' when these prints arrived, because I would have really struggled to do this in my little apartment here in Sydney. And yeah, always make sure you're wearing eye protection and like a respirator of some sort, because this creates a lot of plastic dust and you really don't want to be breathing that in. But yeah, so these are how the raw prints arrived, and we basically just got stuck into it straight away with the electric sander. We didn't have to get this perfect, we just had to be able to remove enough of those little imperfections that you saw earlier, and I'll show you a little before and after again as we go along the process here. But yeah, it was mainly just about cleaning it up, because once we get all the paintwork and finishing and weathering and texturing on this, you weren't going to be able to see a lot of the more obvious layer lines anyway. So obviously I could have sanded this for days and gotten it like completely smooth, but it was more of a weighing up how much time I wanted to spend on this versus how much of it was actually going to be visible. So we did start with like a rougher grit sandpaper, and then eventually went down to a finer one just once we got like the those more obvious ridges and bumps off, then we just wanted to smooth it down as much as possible with that finer grit sandpaper. And of course, there was a little bit of hand sanding required. So just around like the mouth and the eyes, as you can see here, because that little electric sander was not going to be able to get into more of those kind of tight spaces. Had I been doing this at my place in Sydney, I would have been hand sanding the whole thing, and that would have sucked. I probably would have had to sand all my fingertips off by the time I was done. But so far, so good. We've got most of the like more obvious bumps and ridges off, and here you can see the before and after. So this is the raw print that I showed earlier, and it's just, yeah, all those little kind of bumpy nodule bits. And yeah, so PETG does have a little bit of problem printing sometimes. And so on this second one here, we ended up using a little bit of putty just to fill in some of the more obvious grooves and gaps. It just meant we had to do less sanding to try and get a more flush edge. Now, when it came time to paint this and start getting, coats of paint on this, we decided it was a good idea to try and rig it up from the ceiling to hang, just to try and give us as much kind of like full 360 access as possible. We figured if we sat it on the ground or propped it up against anything, we'd just have to rotate it anyway, and then, you're putting wet paint on a surface, and we didn't want that. So we used this kind of wire and rope setup to kind of get us to where we are here. So I like to use just like a black, it's like a primer and a base coat at the same time kind of thing. So you can use it as just like plain black coloring, but it also works as like if you want to put another color on top of it, which of course we are in this case. Now, normally when you're spray painting, you want to do lots of really fine, really light coats. You really don't want to have your paint running. Like, so example, if you're painting like really pristine props, so something like an Iron Man mask, or usually most times you're spray painting, you really don't want to be ending up with these running paint lines. But because I knew this mask was kind of like a dirty, grotty kind of, and like the design itself is literally a drop, and you've got the kind of like running mouth design and eyes, the kind of drippy lines of paint really add, it kind of adds to the whole like effect of it and the texturing of it. So I kind of just lent into it. Eventually we will move on to this green top coat, but I want to do a couple of coats of the black first. So I let this first coat dry a little bit, and then I apply another. And then after it's dried, we have something that looks like this. Now there is still, you still can see layer lines when you're looking really closely, and I'll show you that in a second. But you can also see like, so these drippy bits of paint, like again, you really typically wouldn't want that. It's more indicative of a bad paint job if you see that on like 90% of like other projects, but for this particular mask, it's totally fine. And I just lent into it. And at a certain point I was like, yeah, you can see all those like running paint lines. And as well, you can still see the layer lines, but once we've finished up with the top coat of green, and then there's a little bit of shoe polish we put on top as well, you really can't notice it. So moving on to the green now. Also, I forgot to mention before, make sure you've always got a drop sheet down when you're painting, because paint just, even if you're not purposefully running the paint, it's likely just to drip. But with the green, you don't want to like put it on, you don't want to completely cover the black. You actually want some of that black to show through, because it's going to give that green a really nice kind of mottled, kind of deeper texture or deeper finish to it. I don't quite know how to word it, but you'll see here that leaving a little bit of that black showing through actually really helps sell the effect of this being like a dirty kind of used or Halloween mask. It's less pristine. So this is the kind of final paint job we went with it. We're just doing a little final light coat of green, but you can still see that the black is coming through in places. So that one on the left is I was just testing out some painting with the black, that's why it's like half painted. But that one on the right, yeah, that's the kind of green, that's the green finish we went with. And you can still see all these little bits of layer lines and like imperfections, but it's working. I think it works really well for the actual look of the mask here.
So now we're at the point where we want to apply just some straight up shoe polish. There's absolutely nothing fancy about this. I just got a little bit of it in a container there, and just use like a dirty old paintbrush to kind of like paint it on. I'll dab it on again in a second. And the idea behind that is that the shoe polish will kind of find its way into all these little grooves and imperfections and bumps and stuff. And it just really sits in those places, and it looks, again, just another layer of texturing to kind of really give it that lived in worn vibe. It truly does not matter how you apply this whatsoever. You can literally just like whack it on however, and then as long as you kind of do like a rough sort of polish off or brush off or dab off with a rag, just to make sure that you're not going to be getting it all over your hands. Yeah, it's basically perfect. So you don't necessarily need to do the shoe polish if you're happy with the paint job. So for example, that one on the left is without the shoe polish and this one on the right is with the shoe polish. I just think the shoe polish just really adds to that. I'm using this phrase a lot, but it's this dirty, grimy texture. This is actually really uncomfortable as well without anything in it. I'll show you a bit later, but I do pat out the top of it with a sponge just to try and make it a little bit more comfortable to wear, because the top of it is not really designed. It wasn't really designed with comfort in mind. Now, I don't have any footage of this, but basically what I do now is I hook it back up to do a final like sealer coat, and it was just like a gloss sealer. And what that does is it basically just means that because I knew I was going to be shooting with this mask out in the rain and in like a very wet environment, I didn't want it to run any of that shoe polish off. I wanted it to try and stay and stick as much as possible. So that was the idea behind the clear coat. So this is the one that I actually shot in and did a lot of the filming in. The other one that I've been waving around was the spare one that I had on hand. Now the inside of this is gonna look dodgy because I taped up all this kind of black interior very last minute. This side here is just like a fly screen gauze. This side was like a black fabric. I can't even remember why I ended up using one on one side and not the other. I'll actually show you guys, I'll tape up this second one here and I'll probably use it, I'll probably use the fly screen for all of it, just because, again, as you can see in here, the fly screen is just a lot easier to see out of, and it still creates the same kind of like can't really see into it effect, which is what you want. So, alrighty, so you just want to grab yourself some fly screen. Now I just picked this up from a hardware store, a pair of scissors, and of course just some duct tape. Now you can use masking tape, or truthfully any old tape is really going to do here. And then you just want to cut your fly screen in. I used 2 layers to begin with, and you just want to cut it slightly bigger than your eye holes. I cut it a little bit too big here, so then I trim it down further. But ultimately you could just use one piece for both eyes, and I do end up doing that later on. But yeah, so you just want to tape that in there as best you can. It doesn't have to look pretty, and as you can see here, it absolutely doesn't look pretty. But with the 2 layers of fly screen, and then I whack it on my head here. So with the 2 layers, you can see that it's still not quite dark enough. You can still see in straight through to my eyes, which is not really what you want. So I go back in and I double it up with another 2 layers, and I just stick it across both eyes simultaneously here. Again, it doesn't have to look pretty on the inside, but then once it's on, yeah, you basically can't see in anymore. And that's pretty much perfect. You can do exactly the same thing with the mouth hole as well. I don't have any footage of it, but it will work exactly the same. And then once we're inside the mask here, this is what it's going to look like. So you still have really, really good visibility without anyone else being able to see in.
Now, the puffer jacket is something that I knew I always wanted to beat it up a bit. I wanted it to make it look really kind of dirty and worn. So I tried to get something as cheap as possible because I knew I wanted to tear it to shreds and cover it in dirt and crap. And just to kind of give it that kind of dirty Gotham crime kind of vibe to it. If you want to add if you always want to be adding like a level of authenticity to your props or your costumes, you want to try and weather them as much as possible. But at the same time, you also want to try and be budget cost effective. So don't go out and buy like a $100 jacket and then tear it to shreds, and try and get something as cheap as you can. I think this one here I actually picked up on, I think it was Temu. As far as weathering this goes, my weathering process is very refined. And it's basically throwing it on the ground and beating it to death with a brick. You'd be surprised how well this method actually works, because it's literally creating real wear and tear. And then like all the like black stuff on it as well, that was literally just shoe polish. I've used shoe polish on my batsuit and some of like my armor and stuff. I've used it on the drifter. Just shoe polish is really versatile as far as if you want to put like a layer of gunk or grime on something. Now, exactly the same goes for the under hoodie as well. You just want like a gray zip-up hoodie. That seems to be pretty much all that guy is wearing in the film. And again, all these holes and things was literally just a matter of me throwing it on the ground. And I took to it with like some rocks and dirt and a brick. And it just, yeah, it started to put these holes in it. Looked really nice. There's some dirt on it as well. It still hasn't washed out, which is good. Again, gives it that nice, authentic Gotham City look. Now, as far as the pants go, when I was filming in this, I literally just used, they were like some black. I'm pretty sure they're actually the same pants I'm gonna use for my like Man in Black Daredevil cosplay. In the film, I'm pretty sure he's wearing some sort of tracksuit pants, and they're like a Converse shoe or like a sneaker. Doesn't really matter ultimately. The big iconic items, iconic I say for a character that had 60 seconds of screen time, but you know what I mean. The recognizable items for this cosplay are gonna be, they're gonna be this one and your red puffer jacket, and that's gonna get you like 90% of the way there. The rest of it is mainly just kind of like nice fluff if you're trying to go like super accurate for it. Now, there is a set of gloves that he wears. They're pretty much just any black set of gloves you want. I just went for like just a random set of gardening gloves for this because I was like, I'll just run into Bunnings and see what I can pick up. But yeah, literally any kind of, you can wear any kind of glove you want. Again, such a minor character. If you want to be really accurate, again, it would be probably some kind of black latex glove, maybe, or maybe like some kind of, literally anything, doesn't matter. Just get yourself a pair of gloves, just if you want to complete the look. Now, if you would like to support this fan film that I'm working on, the most significant thing that you could do for me is to just simply subscribe. Subscribe to the channel, like my content, and that goes so much further than you could possibly imagine with helping me get this thing off the ground. Because having more people engaging with my content ultimately helps me be able to spend more time making this stuff and, you know, bringing this film to life. As I've spoken about previously, it's very much only in like a fledgling kind of state at the moment. I've only filmed a few very loose cursory scenes to try and see how this will look, see if it'll work. I'm very confident with it so far. But yes, the most significant thing you can do towards supporting that film coming to life is just to simply subscribe to the channel, watch my content. That means more than you could possibly imagine. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've gotten something out of this video today. I really love just kind of doing these little breakdowns for you. If there's anything else you'd like to see from me, my channel, my content, please let me know down below. I'll be responding to all your comments. Take it easy, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.